there is now a discussion about universalism. And oh yes, I was going to. I do have a Substack post. Let me close the window though. It is the summer now, and right. Well, this universalism thing is quite interesting to me anyway, because I guess it was what's bothering Luke in a way, if you do listen to him. I don't think. Thank you for mentioning Scott. Well, I do think that he is somewhat dogmatic. He's dismissing politics because he's just assuming it won't work. But obviously it did work in the past, right? It worked when the founding fathers could organize their revolution and fought their revolutionary wars. And is any American regretting it? Is any American wanting to be more like Canada? I don't think so, if they were properly informed. And I know a lot of people do think that I'm too obsessed with rules and hierarchy and status, but how else are we to solve our problems if we don't prioritize what's important to us? So let me try and summarize what I think I heard on Mark D. Parker's stream. Somebody complained about the terrible title, which is, and his, what used to be called Mark D. Parker, but now it's called pseudo-Catholic, and somebody said it was terrible. And I thought, how about the wandering Christian? Because he does wander a lot and go from. Well, he was briefly a Buddhist, and now he's thinking of becoming a Catholic. So it would be fair to call Mark Parker a wandering Christian, not Well, I suppose it's a kind of a pun on the wandering Jew, but I think that would be quite catchy. But perhaps he will adopt my suggestion. Who knows? And I've been very impressed with the quality of the discourse on Mark Parker's streams. And I know recently people have been very excited about the heat map, which I'm not sure who created, about the TLC. So it's a lot of coloured dots, or that can be stretched and moved around. And apparently I'm closest to the Jewish corner. I think I would be on the peripheries anyway. So that seems to be reasonably accurate with the heat maps classified according to the transcripts and by the favorite words we use. I do remember once getting so exasperated about Luke when I decided to go back into TLC in a big way, and I asked Jacob what he thought Luke's problem was, and well, he did warn me that Luke basically doesn't want to have his position questioned, and I think that's why I find him so irritating. It's not that I don't want to discuss his ideas. He doesn't want to discuss his ideas. And my view is that, well, if you have something outrageous to say that goes against the mainstream, well, the least you can do is defend it with facts and logic. And declining to do so and saying that his practice is to ghost and post and ghost means that, well, you're never ever going to get anywhere with whatever you have a problem with, or your thing that other people have a problem with. And in my view, you either say what you believe to be the truth and challenge others to come at you, or if you're not secure, if you're not intellectually secure about what your position is, then don't say anything and work it out in your mind. And but I thought what was the most telling thing about Luke when he was talking to Scott yesterday was that he didn't really care if it doesn't make sense. He just wants to believe in it, and I think it's a bit childish, isn't it? If you want to believe in something, such as fairies and unicorns and leprechauns, then you have to be prepared for the responses of incredulity when people hear that you think the moon is made of cheese, or or whatever it is that goes against the current orthodoxy. Either say it and expect to be challenged, or don't say it and nobody challenges you. But don't say it and then not be challenged. Or take all kinds of avoidant tactics so you don't have to discuss it. So I'm glad I managed to reduce this thing to questions. So the problem, Luke says people are angry with him when he tries to talk about universalism, and he seems to think they're being mean, or he doesn't know why they get angry. But I think it's simple, really. If you believe in universalism, then the question then people will ask, are you saying nobody goes to hell if you say everyone goes to heaven? And the answer must be, well, what is the answer? So Luke says he believes in hell, so, or does he or doesn't he? I think he did say he did say once he believed in hell. So and so how can that be reconciled with universalism? And the answer seems to be after suffering torment, we are allowed to get to heaven. And so he must therefore believe in reincarnation and purgatory. And I asked him if that was indeed the case. I have yet to get an answer. But his position seems to be based on reading a book called Lilith by George MacDonald, who is a congregational minister. So he's not without some qualification to talk about the matter, but none of us would know personally, wouldn't we? We can only wish that universalism is a case, or adhere to the conventional view that we go to the good place or the bad place. But I think reincarnation in purgatory solves the problem, because if you think God is compassionate and will allow you to have more than one chance, in the same way that you will be allowed to resit an exam that you failed, then presumably this must happen because there's no other way around it. So reincarnation can be believed in without taking us out of the Abrahamic religions. And we also know that Orthodox Jews do believe in a reincarnation. So we've solved the problem, right? Because if you ask the question, what religion would you choose if you wanted to go to heaven as soon as possible? And the answer must be, well, a process of elimination if there's only the 5 world religions to choose from. So it can't be any of the Eastern religions, either of the Eastern religions of Hinduism and Buddhism. So you're left with 3. And if you're Gentile, you're left with 2, Christianity or Islam. And if you want to increase the chances of getting to heaven, well, because the thing with the Jews is that the Torah doesn't mention heaven at all. And so I guess the Jews had to make it up in their Talmud, speculating on, the possibility of heaven and whether Jews and Gentiles would be separate and, all kinds of things. And we know that some rabbis think it's perfectly in order to believe in reincarnation. I hope you're not being too bored. I'm just talking aloud, thinking aloud, really. So if Jews are allowed to believe in reincarnation, then I think so would Christians. And maybe Muslims. So the process of reincarnation is, well, to give people a chance if they didn't get it quite right. I mean, what if you were... And I always go back to the idea of, well, if you were born Christian and you lived under an absolute monarchy and you had no right, you had no First Amendment rights, as Europeans didn't before the founding of the American Republic, then you could only assert your right to your own beliefs by risking being burnt at the stake, as Michael Servetus found to his cost. Obviously, some people got away with it, but the Anabaptists didn't. The Anabaptists were the ones who suffered the most because basically they were asking to be baptized again. Because originally, and you still see this in the Orthodox Church, so they have a very big ceremony when their baby is born, when they are born. And you can look on YouTube and find rather horrific videos of a baby being dunked into water very, very quickly. And it does seem rather cruel, but it is done. It is part of the ritual. And what they do is an all-in-one ritual. Because I know with Anglicans and Catholics, they are baptized, and the confirmation is 13 years later usually, and the idea is to have a 2-stage process for being a paid up member of the church. But with Orthodox Christians, it's an all-in-one ceremony, and this means that the the infant who was subject to the process, the procedure, the ritual of chrismation, might ask 13 years later, well, what was this Trinity thing? Could you explain? I don't understand. And why don't you tell me? And, all that kind of thing. And you can imagine how people who are a bit stubborn might ask about these things and then refuse to shut up and then end up being burnt at the stake. With more and more people just doing it because they were told that they couldn't question the Trinity. But we can understand also that there will be a lot of people who knew for certain that they would not be questioning the Trinity if doing so meant being burnt at the stake. So they didn't. But if it is true that Christianity is idolatry, as Jews and Muslims seem to say it is, then this has implications for the Christian ancestors of 21st century Christians. And I think it's a little cruel, or indeed very cruel, to subject these Christians of previous centuries to hell when the consequence of questioning the divinity of Jesus was so severe and life-threatening. So I would like to think that these people have been, given a second chance, and, God might be sitting behind his desk and asking the Christian questions like, the deceased Christian, I should say, questions like, well, you can see that I'm not Jesus, and this means you're guilty of idolatry, which is a mortal sin, and therefore I will give you another chance, and I will give you another life. And from your knowledge of comparative religion, what religion would you like to choose for your parents in your next life? Well, I think I know the answer, but I fear there will be people who will say, I choose to be Christian again. So, and they might not even understand, even after the end of their next life or their next life. So we don't know. But I would like to think that God, if he exists, operates operates the practice of grade retention. So if you didn't learn your lesson, you'll just be forced to repeat. If you didn't pass your exam, you'll just be forced to repeat your lesson again and again and again until eventually you do. But of course, at some time, this process will end and there will come the end times. And we don't know at which point God, if he exists, will end the game, so to speak. I mean, we don't know what the pass mark is, do we? Or how many resets we're allowed to have. So while I think Muslims are kind of there, if you think of it as a snakes and ladder game, Muslims would be on, the ninth row. Sorry, the 10th row of this snakes and ladder. Sorry. Snakes and ladders board. So but they also have a danger of, going, this, if you've ever played the game, it goes right to the bottom, this really long snake that will take you back to the bottom and you have to start again. But back to the question of purgatory, yes, the more I think about it, the more necessary purgatory is, and also it is an established concept in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In Islam, it's called barzakh, which is apparently the idea that when you're dead, you lie in your grave, and if you've been a good person, your grave is like a comfortable bed. But if you haven't been a good person, then it narrows uncomfortably. So, just trying to steel man Luke's idea to make universalism compatible with hell, with the existence of hell, then we have to think that eventually some people will get to hell, the really, really, evil people, or the really, really stupid people who never learn the lessons they're supposed to learn, when it's really quite easy when you think of the 7 Noahide laws, which rabbis are supposed to use to rank the 4 Gentile religions, which I keep telling them to do, which they refuse. So I suppose a few rabbis will be not going to the better place. When you think of how long the idea has been around, the Noahide laws are in the Babylonian Talmud, for heaven's sakes. When was the Babylonian Talmud completed? Babylonian Talmud completed. We don't seem to have a Talmud for now. Have the Jews just given up? Right, the Babylonian Talmud was primarily compiled and edited in Mesopotamia between the 3rd and 6th centuries, with a main redaction traditionally finalized around 475 CE by Ravina II. Final editorial touches were added by the subsequent Sabarayan sages, establishing the text in its definitive form by approximately 500 to 600 CE. The compilation of the Babylonian Talmud was a culmination of centuries of rabbinic debate, legal rulings, and biblical commentary in the academies of Babylonia. The timeline of its compilation includes... Okay, maybe you don't want to know that. So, so why won't... You see, a lot of the problem is people not really doing the thing they're supposed to be doing. And it's hypocrisy, which I think is kind of referred to in the New Testament, but maybe not so much by word in the Old Testament, but it's certainly referred to in the Quran, and there's even a chapter devoted to hypocrites who are hell-bound. And you might think it a bit harsh, because I suppose we're all we've all been a little hypocritical at times. And I would define hypocrisy as pretending to be better than you are, or pretending to believe in things you don't in order to be a member of a religious group. And we can understand why people might want to be part of a religious group, particularly if they are powerful. And a lot of the people who join might not be completely sincere or obey all the rules. So I think Allah, if he exists, would be kind of closing the exits for hypocrites who pretend to believe, because they are actually the obstacles to the fulfillment of the law, to the obedience to the law. So you can imagine, why these Jews for so many centuries did not feel that they had it in them to rank the four Gentile religions, which I keep telling them to, because really, what is the point of Jews anyway? That, I mean, I suppose they would say, well, they're here to show us a better way of behaving, to be the gold standard or something. And I think in their heart of hearts they think that's what they are. They are they think of themselves as superior and privileged and special, and fair enough if they are indeed having to observe a more rigorous religion and having to be very strict, but not if they in practice break their rules. So all the ideas of martyrdom, they actually came from Judaism. So I know Christians have their martyrs and Muslims also have their martyrs, but the idea actually came from Judaism because of the concept of Kiddush Hashem, which means sanctification of the name of the Lord, which means martyrdom. And they have certain conditions when they are expected to martyr themselves. So if this cruel Gentile forces them to eat pork, they can eat pork. If they force them to break the Sabbath, I think, let me just check. I used to know this by heart. Kiddush Hashem. It's a precept of Judaism. Martyrdom is the ultimate act of sanctification of the name. The name means God. And this would be a Jew who is prepared to sacrifice his life rather than commit idolatry, forbidden sexual acts, or murder. So there you are. I think they're allowed to break the Sabbath in order to protect their lives. So obviously, Jesus was the first Christian martyr, and there have been a few in Islam. But it's not exclusive to the Abrahamic religions, because In a way, soldiers are kind of martyrs to their country if they're fighting a defensive war against an invading enemy. And really, when we talk about principles, we're really talking about hills we want to die on, or hills we feel we have to die on, because it's a point of pride, it's part of our identity, and we're going to fight the enemy to the death in order to defend whatever foundational principles that we have. And men, basically, whether they want it or not, they are basically expected to defend territory and women, and therefore it's an important principle for women too, because without men dying to defend territory, then women wouldn't be much protected, and often they were carried away as slaves if their men lost the battle against the invading army. And so, what would induce men to instinctively, without religion, do this for women? I know a man who joked, and I'm sure he wasn't really joking, who said that if his country were invaded, he'd run away. He wouldn't see any point in defending his country or the women, because, well, I don't know if he was actually joking or serious. He does have a daughter, but he's divorced. But probably he won't, most people don't really run away because, well, it's a lot of walking, isn't it? It's a terrible journey. And I guess in practice, only the young people survive, and I guess the elderly will just say, well, we'll just die where we are. But the point is that men are supposed to defend to the death their territory and their women and their children. And this is a principle that I think is generally accepted. And if you don't accept it, you would be considered a coward and a deserter. And receive no honor and no marriage opportunities, because as a woman, you wouldn't want to marry a deserter because you think, well, when things get hard, he's also going to abandon me. So I'll, not put myself through that. Well, I don't know how we've got to. Oh, yes, men dying for the principle of being men. Now, do women have to die for the principle of being women? I'm saying not really, if we're clever. So all we have to do, ladies, is basically do the bare minimum of making men want to be men. And because men are so motivated by sex, it shouldn't be that hard. I mean, that's my point. It shouldn't be that hard to motivate men into wanting to have, into marrying them. Of course, men will want to have sex without the marriage license. But the point for women is to, just get it together to make sure the ring is on their finger before they have sex. And that would actually save their civilization. I don't think it's that hard to understand. Is it? Oh, that's all. I'm going to say on the subject, is it that hard to understand and do? I'm sure our female ancestors had no difficulty understanding it, and possibly did they live in more stable times? There have been world wars, 2 world wars. The Americans had a civil war. The Europeans are always fighting each other about apparently nothing. So maybe things were not that great, but at least our ancestors knew what they were supposed to do. And this is the point I wanted to emphasize. Thank you all for coming.